gets to the point. I mean, to me, the discussion of regionalism is diversity is very important, and the discussion has to be had. But it's really all about money, and it's all about there not being enough money for artists. And what are we going to do about it? Well, we have a system that doesn't work for artists. It doesn't allot funding for grassroots growth of arts programs. Our public schools, they don't do anything. They do very little with the arts. So it's a systemic problem, and so it's a problem that Marx talked about. I mean, to me, diversity is part of it, but diversity is a problem of money as well. And I think you're right. I think saving money by going to the community colleges that, quite frankly, are doing the consistently most progressive work in the education of the arts in the metroplex. It's all happening at the community colleges. It's not happening at my school. It's not happening at your school either, Dr. Koretz. And it's not happening at, I don't know, any of the other institutions in town. It's happening is that where you're teaching? They do the best shows. I write about them because they're the most interesting. And I also notice that the teachers are treated properly. They're given a little money that they can use to do their thing. But I know they're respected.
Yeah, I think, also I want to just say that I'm enrolled at SMU right now, and I think SMU is doing a great job. They also offer a scholarship for people who don't, and there are people in Dallas that don't know this. So I don't know, what I'm not clear about is why SMU doesn't do more to get that out there. I remember asking, I'm going to be completely upfront, I remember asking about the amount of applications that come through to SMU. There are artists all over this country who feel a need to get an MFA degree in order to succeed in the art world. And one of the major things holding them back is the financial commitment. If they knew that SMU is offering scholarships, there would be a huge waiting list. There'd be like 500 applicants, and you'd be able to pick from that pool.
Everybody'd be as good as you.
Well, very sweet of you, but honestly, you'd be able to get some incredible artists into that school. Not that they don't have good artists there now, they do, but you get even more. And that SMU also has major money. The amount of money they're dumping into the George Bush is obscene. They could actually create a facility that could house a graduate studio program of 30, 40 artists. Yes, please.
The library's privately funded.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And his supporters paid for the construction. So don't spread the rumor.
Okay. Okay.
Did you get that for the news, for the blog?
Yeah.
All right.
SMU does not fund
That's good to know.
the Bush Library.
Yeah.
So don't spread that bullshit.
Right. Well, that's true, and I knew that in terms of the faculty being against it. But I guess what I'm trying to point out is that fact that SMU could possibly commit more space and funding to the metals department. And I know that that's probably one of the top concerns of being there is hopefully to get it to grow more. But I just wanted to say, when I was asked to talk about the colleges here, I just wanted, when I talked about the community colleges to begin with, I also wanted to say that I thought SMU was doing a great job. That's just one of those things where it's a scholarship school that people don't really know about, and there are more opportunities like that in Texas, maybe not scholarship programs at universities, but other things that if we were more familiar with and people were more active in applying to, maybe it could generate more interest. Possibly. So.
I would like to speak to education real quick.
Absolutely.
I'm the only female tenure track professor in an architecture school in Dallas, Texas. And I find that.
Did you hear that? That's a huge thing.
That is awesome.
Everybody's
And
on that.
knock on wood, I hope to be the first tenured woman at UTA.
Send letters to the dean and
It's
architect.
2012, right? Yeah. Okay. That said, I want to say.
You forgot they're taking our rights away. I'm just saying, it's consistent.
Well, and I'm so glad I've actually met some people in the art department at UTA, because I've met Stephen Lithusapon, who's been doing great things in West Dallas, taking these abandoned buildings and doing these interesting installations with 3 or 4, I guess, university art programs just recently. But for me, the students have really, I feel like I'm at an uphill battle doing what I'm trying to do with my students in studio, being in a high modernist education. They talk to the students and they present the work, and it's such a high modernist.
That's a
You know-
problem of regionalism, actually, an old-fashioned kind of local,
Yeah, and they have huge.
stuck way.
They have huge, I mean, you know, modernism did not save the world, so can regionalism? I mean, I don't know, but it's, I'm really
Good
struggling.
projects too.
Well, I'm struggling with, you know, the student work that I'm trying to do because it's not accepted at the institution I'm at. And I just
Hence
had a
the
tenure
reason why-
review, and it's just, you know, the critiques I get from the student work that is presented in the city and has been gotten press and all this stuff, it's not accepted where I teach. And so how does one operate within that? And thank God I'm in Dallas and I have people like you to talk to and present the work to.
Well, it's
Because that
about
keeps me going.
subverting the institution.
Explain a little bit more about what you mean by that. What is it about that they are rejecting about?
Well, it's an institution. UTA is a great architectural school, but most of the pedagogy there is based on what's been there for the last 30 years, and all male, pretty much older, and I'm probably going to get denied tenure.
Yeah,
or
you
something.
Tell her. Straight around.
You guys should hide in private.
You know, I went to Auburn University, Sam Mbakwe. I didn't go to the Rural Studio, but I was educated in a place where you could, you know, tap into the local. You were, I am going back to my roots. I feel it. I've gone to Columbia. I've done the blob and the modernist stuff, and you know, come back to UTA to really try to find myself. I find myself doing these things the last 2 years, and there is a little bit of, you know, resentment. And I don't know what it is. It's just like I don't fit in the club
Well,
there.
if they haven't tenured a woman, need we say more?
Yeah. I had to close my case.
You know, I want to bring up just the notion of how valid is it even to talk about regionalism anymore when you talk about a place that has, I mean, I'm not a Texan, and my sensibility will never be Texan. Not to say there's anything wrong with Texas sensibility. I'm just saying I was raised as a Yankee, okay? And I know that has colored the work, it's colored what I do, and all of that. There are so many other people in Dallas that are not Texans. They're not Dallasites, they're not Texans. So what does regionalism even mean anymore when you're talking about places that have this amalgamation of folks from all over the world?
Look, because partially this came out of, she's my graduate, one of my best graduate students, and good friend. And I wrote a piece that ended up in A&C. They called it Occupy Art, and it was based on. I did this artist residency in Florida based on an idea of critical regionalism, which is an architectural essay, which is it's not about the kind of insular regionalism of the 1930s. So that's one piece of the puzzle, but I've known a lot of people in town who constantly want to talk about what's wrong with Texas with regionalism, what's wrong with Texas, regionalism is great, like in a 1930s kind of way. So, for example, there was a panel at the Fort Worth Modern a year ago on regionalism. I thought it was well intended, but it went terribly. They brought Robert Storr in, and he decimated, just like what you said. He just said that for 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and he was brilliant. And I'm not interested in rectifying or bringing back regionalism. What I'm interested in is critical localism, because actually what's interesting is because what happens if things keep getting crappy with the economy and gas keeps going up? What happens if we all get stuck and we can't move? Then we're going to be sitting together doing stuff, and we're going to be making stuff, and maybe we can locally butcher so then we all can eat some meat and not a little bit of meat. Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, I think maybe, progressive local practices, which is what we are. I've always thought it, for all of what Dallas has done with me and for me and to me over the last 8 years, I have always had you guys. And that I have always liked. And this is community, right? I mean, so regionalism may not be the right word, but the reason why I have been invoking it is because we have an architectural background with an interesting use of it, but also because people in Dallas have wanted to hold on to it. And so what I thought is this is, for me, has been slightly educational, you know what the word really means, and can we have a progressive regionalism? Could we, now is the time to think about it, because the economy has been in the shitter. We're not gonna get out of it too quickly, nor should we, because do we wanna go back to the way we were? No, right? So I mean, there are lots of interesting practices that are precisely about doing things locally, like art projects, local art projects, that are not necessarily about people being like Texans doing them, but like a Philadelphian doing it here, right? So, but I hear you.
It's about community.
Community. It's an embattled term. It's a really embattled term, but it's contentious, so it makes people argue, which is not bad.
Well, I think that when the economy goes bad, I think that's when artists actually come up with new ways of working with materials, new ways of ideas. I mean, they become much more, exactly, they become very resourceful, very creative, and I think that's when a lot of new ideas kind of are born out of in the economy that we're in, because it's like you can't afford to go out to the art supply store as you usually do. So I think that happens. The other thing, I just want to say that as far as regionalism, I think that if you really think about it, every artist is regional. Bryce Martin was regional at one point. I mean, he just happens to have homes in Pennsylvania and Greece. It's like, I mean, it'd be kind of nice if we won't be so regional we could afford that. It goes back to economics again. But the other thing that I think that was, I don't know if it was mentioned or at the panel, was art criticism. And I think that one of the things that I thought about in 1993, I sat on my second NEA panel, and everybody in the room was from around the country, and I pretty much kind of knew what was going on in their areas, but not many of them knew what was happening in Texas. And I'm not talking about just artists from Texas doing Texas art, but what's happening in contemporary art in Texas. And I thought, what is it that is lacking here? And it's that we didn't have publications like they do in New York and in LA, but not in LA as much as in New York. I mean, that's where all the publications are emanating from. So I was talking with, at that time, who was actually the director of the gallery where I'm at now, Al Harris, and we had talked about, because we were sitting on a Texas biannual jury for DARE in 1993, and I mentioned to him about what I had gotten out from the NEA panel. And there were a lot of people on the NEA panel that remarked that there were so many applicants of visual arts organizations applying for grants from the NEA that year, and they were really impressed. And yet they didn't know, other than the grants, they didn't know what else was going on. A lot of them thought that it was cowboy art, Western art. So I was talking with Al Harris. He shortly started a magazine called Circa that lasted 3 issues. And it was well done. Everybody got paid very well, but it was 3 issues over a year and a half, and then it just kind of went kaput. With Art Lies, I helped co-founded Art Lies with 3 other people, but it was out of a series of discussions with other artists in Houston. And we decided that we really wanted to start this magazine again to have a publication about what's happening, particularly in Houston at that time. But I was thinking that eventually it would grow into a Texas arts magazine, which it did. But I think that, again, that there's so much art happening in the state that what was lacking is a dialogue between people in the cities and in the rural areas. Because I think if you really think about Texas, aside from the major cities, you have museums in Abilene, in Albany, in Marfa, Victoria, down in Brownsville, down in Mission, Texas, Amarillo, Lubbock. I mean, there's a wealth of art museums. I mean, it's amazing. If you think of Europe, it's like we already kind of replicated what Europe has, in the sense that it's not just in the big cities, it has permeated throughout the different layers of our culture in Texas. But what was missing is that there was no connection, there was no dialogue. Nobody would know that something was happening in Victoria, the Navy Museum. So I think that the magazine was it was conduit for dialogue and information. And that the advertising in itself would also be a provider of information about what's going on. So I think that was one of the impetus for starting the magazine. Now, should Art Lights have been the only magazine? No, I think it's really important to have many more. I'm glad that A and C magazine is here. I'm glad that Fluent Collaborative is here. I'm glad that Glass Tire is here. I like to see Art Lights come back, but there's sometimes, I know that the Dallas Morning News used to have a lot of coverage of the art scene here, as well as the Fort Worth papers. And then the last thing I knew that there were, at one point, I was talking to Gail Robinson, who writes for the Star Telegram, saying that she was like dividing her time between the Dallas Morning News and Star Telegram. And it's like, what is that about? You know, I mean, I know that.
Same goes for architecture too. I mean, there
All-
needs to be
it's all of the-
criticism.
it's
Yeah,
actually,
exactly.
it's pretty much all of the arts. It's not just visual art. You know, I mean, this is if we didn't have Art and Seek, and I'm just doing a shameless plug.
Or A and C.
Because they shamelessly plug me.
Or
All right.
ANC.
I'm just saying, if we did not have that, we would not have anything in terms of critical conversations about all of those different
I
disciplines.
think that
For a
that-
city to
I think- I
have
think
7
that-
Pritzker
I think-
buildings
I think there's
and
some
no
questions
art-
now from the,
art-
from the audience. And I think Douglas Martin would like to ask a question.
You guys, one of the mentions in the Glass Tire's comments on the state of our system, the lack of critical writers that everyone here is always saying. But if you look at how social media is working and the friends on Facebook and whatnot, they cross-post whenever they get their own article in Pegasus News or B Magazine or whatever, or whatnot. But I think a simple model would be because a lot of the articles are written by professors and not by students. Students are required to write as part of their MFA and whatnot there. So I think if the schools got in a relationship with the press and shared space, content that publications want anyway, those pages always have tons of ads all around it. If the publications donated as a tax deduction to the institutions, so the DMA and the Modern and whatnot gets free ad space on it that the publication gets a tax benefit from, they get the content that they need, and they don't have to pay for a full-time writer or whatever. The student gets the credits for doing the writing, the Googleability of the artist and the scene in Dallas, the tags and stuff saying African-American artist or surrealist artist or whatever it is, starts adding to the Googleability of Texas and Dallas and regionalism or different minorities and whatnot there. But it seems like the institutions don't know how to properly use the social media and the advertising properly, where Gaudier was all over buses and whatnot there, but it didn't add to the sense of, internationally, most people probably didn't know that we had Gaudier here. But if people were Googling up whatever and they saw, they're reading a page on fashion and then there's somebody else in the gallery or whatever going to the fashion thing or the community colleges or whatever, their shows would come up in there. I think we'd have more content if
Content,
required.
yeah.
Right.
We got
If
more
teachers
glossy
required-
paper cities and modern luxury and FD Lux and all this, but we don't have a decent art and architecture.
Everyone is cutting their art writers, and these students are required to hone in their writing skills anyway. If they're required to write on local shows, whether they be.
I do that, but I hate to tell you, with the exception of Leigh.
work with the press
Well, wait a
to
minute,
actually
with the
publish.
exception of Leigh, the quality of the writing, they're learning to write. That's why they're in school.
You don't get it published, it's not.
And Charlie, with the exception of Charlie and Leigh. Any of my other students in here? Oh, yeah.
Sally Glass.
And Sally Glass.
But doesn't a lot of that also takes a certain amount of funding too, right? I mean, if you're gonna.
Money, we need,
Money.
no,
We need a
money.
paper
Well, if
city
you're
for the
gonna-
arts.
If you're gonna be pressing stuff,
No, I'm talking about online.
Oh, just
All the blogs
online.
and stuff, the
Oh,
magazine
okay.
blog, the Observer
Yeah.
blog, Glass Tire, Pegasus, all the ones that want the advertising from the paid advertisers, the more hits that they're getting on there because Dallas art scene is coming up in there and someone's reading something and then they've got more ad space and
Yeah.
it's possible,
Then
they
it's
go
yeah.
click on there. It helps them, like directing more traffic there, but it helps the whole on scene if there's more tagged content of art and